Greetings, greetings, greetings. Hello out there in podcast land. This is David.
Hey, and this is Tim.
And we're here for Johnny Has the Keys. If you don't know what you're listening to, hopefully you do. But we're two little guys get together and do a podcast. And we talk about horror. We talk about science fiction. We talk about all kinds of crazy stuff. And we're glad you're listening to us. So keep doing that. And make sure you also like us. Make sure you favorite us. Make sure you Facebook us, email us. Do all those good things, right?
Right. Thumbs up.
All the time. So, Tim, what you been doing? How's it been this week? Doing any favorite things? Know anything good?
Yeah, there's a couple things I was going to mention before we get started. One is I recommended a book to you a while back. I don't know if you ever read it, but I think you would love it. Apparently Fox has turned it into a miniseries that starts in January. It's called The Passing. Are you familiar with that?
The Passing?
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
It's a trilogy.
Who's it by?
It's by a guy named Justin Cronin. And I read it years ago because Stephen King was raving about it. And it's one of my, favorite post-apocalyptic novels. But it's about a vampire plague that is...
Oh, yes. Wait. I think you didn't... Yes, you definitely mentioned this to me. I haven't read it. I know Joe, our friend Joe, read it and really liked it. And he's a good vampire aficionado. So, interesting. The Passing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a result of like a genetic... it's it's like genetic mutation experiments within the military is how it all kind of comes to be. And it's and the two following books are pretty good, but I don't know that they top the first book, which is the one that I was alerted to just from following Stephen King, I think, on Facebook or something. But yeah, check it out if you have a chance to read it before you see it, because they may screw it up. Who knows?
Well, yeah, they might, but you never know.
You never know.
Interesting, and it's you're post-apocalyptic, but with vampires. That sounds like a double whammy for you.
Yeah, kind of. Well, I like my zombies, but the vampires are cool too, especially when they're the kind that aren't like necessarily the romantic Anne Rice vampires. These are like the feral, nasty ass vampires, that you really are scared of. Because they're
the Nosferatu good vampires,
right?
The way it should be,
right? Exactly.
As opposed to they sparkle. I'm not.
Yeah, mine.
I am not into that at all. I'm sorry. Sorry out there, Twilight fans, but no. Yeah. Vampires do not sparkle. Yeah. They rip your throats out. That's what they do.
Disco vampires don't do it for me. I got one other thing.
What else? You said you had two.
Yeah. I'm into kind of the indie writing scene because I'm writing. I'm going to publish on my own. I read a book, there's been several big indie successes. Hugh Howey was one. Andy Weir was one with The Martian. And there was one out a few years ago that I kept hearing some buzz about. And I thought, well, I'll pick this up because it's another post-apocalyptic thriller, which, I can't seem to avoid. And it's called Bird Box. And it's about, I think it's like a madness. I did read it. It's like a madness plague that is contagious or infectious via sight. So basically, you've got a bunch of characters running around in the woods with blindfolds on because they're trying to avoid crazy people.
This is the new Netflix.
It is.
It's coming out next week.
Yep, with Sandra Bullock. And this was an indie writer that just put this book out on the internet a few years ago. So I'm thinking
that's excellent.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that these things are getting snapped up, without all the gatekeepers from, the archaic world of publishing and filmmaking too. So
yeah, I mean, I have to say I am, like we mentioned it, I think a couple of weeks ago, but we're like, I think entering like a golden time for genre in general, but also for just movie makers and playwrights, novelists, that sort of thing. Mostly because Netflix has started this whole thing and Hulu caught on to it and now Starz is doing it. HBO was doing it a couple of decades ago, but they were like the only one. It was this independent, we have the bucks, we'll produce your movie. And now all these independents are getting out there. It's kind of like the one I was going to mention to you is because I had another trip this past week, so I was traveling, and on travel I always download or watch or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched a post-apocalyptic that's a different style post-apocalyptic. It was called Into the Forest.
Yeah, you mentioned that to me. I can't remember if it was before last week's podcast or during, but you did mention it to me.
Yeah, so I watched it. Ellen Page,
Right.
Evan Rachel Wood, really good post-apocalyptic one. So I'm trying to stay in my horror genre for the next, few weeks while we go through this.
Yeah.
So
I'll check that out. It's on my list.
And it's not necessarily horror so much as it is just, this post-apocalyptic fear kind of thing. I also watched a documentary which is kind of along the lines of what we like too, and it was called Haunters. Came out a few years ago. I'd never seen it, but a documentary about people who do extreme haunted houses. Pretty interesting. Came out, I think, a year ago, 2 years ago. It deals with all the classic haunted houses first and talks about, remember the JCs? And they talk about how JCs all over America were doing haunted houses every Halloween for their project.
Okay.
And earning the money for nonprofit and all that, and donating the money. And then suddenly, theme parks started haunting. So you had, Not Scary Farm happen, and then you went into all the stuff with Universal Halloween Horror Nights.
Yeah, we almost went. We considered going last time we were down there a couple months ago.
Oh, Universal is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I think Scary Farm is still more scary. I think you would like Not Scary Farm better.
Okay.
But Universal has all the classic monsters and has all the classic
Well, and their
mazes.
houses
And they
are
have all
themed
the properties.
to the movies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All of their mazes are from the movies. So they'll have the Conjuring maze, or whatever. So, but yeah, this one goes into all that, and it's a really cool documentary. It's some of these guys you feel so pathetically sad for because, this is their whole life is just, making monsters and scaring people, and they live in their mom's basement still, kind of thing.
Well, I have to be honest.
The rest of them.
A quick segue. When you said Extreme Haunted House documentary, the first thing that popped into my mind was that you were watching one of those cheap television reality shows where they're running around an empty house with an infrared camera. It's like, oh, I saw something. I saw something.
No, I hate those.
Yeah.
I think those are terrible.
I was like,
the only one I really liked in that genre was one that was a few years ago where they put the front mounted chest cam on them, but they, instead of it being ironically, we're like The Haunting of Hill House the book, but we're paranormal investigators and we're going in to check out this haunted space. It was like, okay, the dare is you have to go into this haunted asylum and stay there all night.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just edited it together. I like that a lot better than the fake pseudo-reality shows. But yeah, no, last thing is they go into this Haunters documentary, you'd probably like, because it goes into extreme haunts, meaning you have a 20-page waiver you have to sign before you even enter the haunt. And they can do anything to you.
Oh.
Like waterboard you.
Oh, my gosh.
And duct tape your eyes shut and everything. And you have to sign a waiver saying you won't get upset if you vomit or if you have minor bodily injury or blah, blah, blah. And I went, what?
What was this
and
on?
One of them is called, you can look it up, it's called McCamey Manor is the one that's getting all the trouble. But it's a haunt that started in California, and he got essentially kicked out of his own house, which is where he had the haunt, was at his property. And now he's relocated, and at the very end of the documentary, they were talking about, well, where have you relocated? And he said near Nashville, or near Memphis, Tennessee. And I went, oh, no. So
it's coming to Tennessee.
Interesting. McCamey Manor, yeah. So look into that. And it's called The Haunters, is the name of it.
Was the name of the documentary? And
yeah.
It was on what?
Yeah, it's on Netflix.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check that out. That just sounds right up my alley. I want to see this shit.
It's called Haunters: The Art of the Scare.
Okay.
And part of it is really cool, and the other part kind of scares me, that people really like to go that extreme. But then again, Eli Roth. So
Yeah, it's like
there you go.
extreme fetish. It's like an extreme fetish thing.
Yeah, it would be,
It could
sort
be.
of. Yeah, it's these people who, not just like the adrenaline of a normal jump scare, boo scare, haunted house or whatever, but they want to be pushed to their physical and mental limits.
Good God Almighty.
And I was like, yeah, no, I like the jump scares, but don't push my limits. Yeah, don't do that.
I have one last
I don't
question
care.
though. Back to what I was talking about, the Ghost Hunter TV. What credentials, where do you go to get credentials to be a paranormal investigator is what I would like to know. Because
Good
I
question.
think I could be one. Or at least I'd like to tell people I am one. I could just make some
Yeah, well,
cards
there could
up.
be that.
I'm Tim Smith. I'm a paranormal investigator.
Well, it occurs to me almost a segue to what we're going to talk about, but you might want to look into like a Stephen kind of career,
Yeah.
where you go in and you're going to write the novel about it.
Smith Investigations. We got your ghost.
Yeah, and I like the fact that and I like the fact that he says I'll embellish a little bit. I always do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a nice segue anyway, since we're talking about paranormal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about the third episode of The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix.
Yes. And we have already established, for those dear listeners who have already heard our first two episodes, we're going to cover one podcast per episode of this 10-part series, written and directed, or created and directed by Mike Flanagan, based on Shirley Jackson's novel. And we both have already established we both love it. We like it a lot. We highly recommend it. If you have not seen it, stop the podcast now and go watch it. And then come back, because we do have to remind you that we will be spoiler filled, as we say, because we like to comment on everything. So if you haven't, stop now, go watch it, come back.
Yeah, and even if even if you're picking up this episode years down the road, or you're picking it up, a few months down the road, we always want to hear what you think. Just because this could potentially be an old broadcast, reach out to us on Facebook or on our website. We'd love to see, if you've got some things you'd like to say that we may have missed, or that may be, intriguing
Yeah.
to others, and we would like to bring that up in a later podcast, or perhaps just on the website itself. So.
And if you're a first-time listener and you don't know what Johnny Has the Keys is, we basically look for keys in any particular genre piece we pick, whether it's a movie, a television series, a book sometimes, or just random musings that we do. But we look for keys, meaning things that have either inspired the current piece or things that the current piece has now ended up inspiring.
Yeah, keys is really short for key elements that either inspire or influence, or were influenced by. They could influence others or be influenced by. Yeah.
And on a personal note, the only reason we did it was because we realized that there were lots of things that influenced our lives. And so that's why we wanted to pick them and talk about them.
And I must say, it's becoming one of my favorite parts of the episode if we save them to the end, because I can't wait to see if you get the ones that I get and vice versa. It's
okay. Yeah. Okay. So we will do that this time. I will refrain key dialogue until the end.
Yeah, it's hard, and because sometimes they just pop out at you right during the middle of an episode. You don't even realize it until we're recording.
I know. Yeah. We'll be talking and then suddenly go, oh wait, that reminds. Yes, that's right. Okay, so let's we'll do a breakdown. So okay. If you have listened to the other two, you know this, but if you haven't, what we do is we basically go through the episode. So we talk through it scene by scene. And any comments we might have that come to us. So this episode, I noticed, was not written by Mike Flanagan. It had a different author. So I thought that was very interesting, the way that happened. The first scene in this one is, if I recall correctly, is Theo. So we established right from the very beginning we're going to talk about Theo, and it's young Theo in bed. Nellie gets in bed with her and holds her hand. And again, to what we talked about last week, he does this thing that he really likes throughout this entire series of these kind of side angles of people sleeping on their side in bed. So that behind them, either in the dark or behind them in bed that we cannot see, is something or someone else. And he does that so far a lot in the first 3 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And in this particular scene, Theo is obviously in bed, and the hand reaches around, and she says, Nellie, are you scared again? Blah, blah, blah. She holds her hand. Then she says, Nellie, you're holding me too tight.
Mm-hmm.
Stop. She turns around and wakes up, and there's no Nellie. There's
Nobody's
in bed
there.
with her, in fact.
But something was holding her hand.
And she even says, whose hand was I holding?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I remember correctly, that's actually from the book,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, that's a key that we can go ahead and expose, even though we save them, because it is directly lifted from the book. Theo, actually, I think it's actually Eleanor that is in bed, and she thinks Theo's holding her hand, and then she realizes that there's nobody there. And I think that line, who was holding my hand, was lifted verbatim. I'm pretty sure. I didn't check.
Okay, whose hand was I holding?
Yeah,
or whatever. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
So that is from the book, and I'm pretty sure they used it in the original movie too.
And what a great setup.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to go right from that to, the credits, and then, I mean, it just, again, we're in this mood of it's going to be literally haunting, and it may not be all the jump scares all the time. It's not going to be all the gore all the time. It's going to be this ominous feeling that he creates in everything. One of the things that I'll talk about in this episode a lot is, again, his use of these forced cuts, and how one cut, whether it's a time cut or even a spatial cut, one element goes right to the other. Last week, we talked about Theo pouring a glass of milk, cutting back to somebody else in the past pouring a glass of milk.
Right.
Shirley pouring it for the kittens, kind of thing, was last episode. And he does that in this one. But we come out of the credit sequence, and then we're into Theo doing an interview.
It's her job, isn't it?
And yes,
Yeah.
She's doing a counseling session
Right.
with a child, a little girl named Kelsey, and Kelsey is telling her about Mr. Smiley, who is
it's like a boogeyman.
A boogeyman that she can't stop. And it's again almost like the very pilot episode with with the woman's story about her husband. We get another story here.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. I just think it's really cool how if he does deviate from the main plot, the little subplots are equally as interesting as the main story. Whether it be that woman's husband that died, that she said she was seeing reaching down from her from the ceiling, or whether it's this little girl that Theo is counseling. They're not frivolous subplots. They're there for a reason.
Yes, very much so. And I like the fact that he's making this storytelling unique and combining stories within stories, which is great. Even like we said last episode about the mom saying, stories stay on. Everybody's life is a story. So that's kind of, and this one is Kelsey, a little girl who Mr. Smiley is the boogeyman and she can't get away from him. She even says the line about the third stair from the top creaks and I can always hear it. Ugh. And so you get this kind of creepiness to it. And then when Theo asks her, where does Mr. Smiley live? She puts the little doll underneath the dollhouse. And so Theo assumes the basement, kind of thing. And then I thought it was very interesting. This actress, by the way, I just love her. I think she is, I think you even said she's very...
Angelina Jolie. Yeah, she reminds me of Angelina Jolie.
She's very Angelina Jolie-esque, but has some great line interps. I like her a lot. You told me, and I checked it out, and you're correct. She is Mike Flanagan's wife, in fact. But she does this great scene with Kelsey about talking about walls again, which is a similar dialogue to what she had with her own sister Shirley about you and I are alike. We build walls, and the walls are good because they protect us, and we build it brick by brick and blah, blah, blah. So I thought that was an interesting dialogue with her. And I had a question that came from it. Do you think it's odd that Theo is a psychiatrist, or obviously a psychologist, psychiatrist?
No more so than Stephen being a writer or Shirley being a mortician. I mean,
Okay.
they all had to have careers, and I mean, they are unique careers, and to make it more interesting from a writing perspective, I can see why you would want to give them careers that lend to the story itself.
Mm-hmm.
But with I mean, Shirley's definitely lends to the story, and Stephen being a writer definitely lends to the story. With Theo, well, you know what? I think it lends to the story too because she's got that touch. That's what the name of the episode is. If we neglected to mention, it's touch.
Mm.
That is clairvoyant, and she helps people with it. And to go into a field where you're helping people mentally, I mean, I don't think it's that far of a stretch, you know.
No, I think it's very interesting, and I think it also shows, he's crafted this story in such a great way that each of their professions is related to what happened to them in the past, and also is their way of coping with what happened in the past.
Right. I mean, I don't know that we
So,
know all of them. Do we know what Nell did? I have no idea, or I've forgotten.
no,
Yeah. See, I don't think we know everything.
but I think we might know either next episode or the episode after. You
Hmm.
know.
Oh, okay. Maybe
um,
I've just
but
forgotten.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
but I can think from a surprise element, sort of. Based on what we have seen of Theo so far, so the first two episodes, and again, in case we didn't mention at the beginning, you and I have already seen this entire series and watched
Hmm.
the whole thing, and now we're rewatching it an episode at a time.
Right.
So, and trying to keep it episode centric in our comments, but from what we have seen Theo in the past two episodes, she was always had an opinion. She was almost always drinking. She has an alternative lifestyle,
Hmm.
and she lives in a small cottage or guest house on her sister's
It's
property.
not a lifestyle, David. Don't get all the haters out there
Okay.
on us, especially since I'm a part of that community.
Well, so she is gay
Yeah.
and she likes it and everything, and so
Also,
she seemed to be set up as kind of um, someone who lived on the outside of society, someone who has walled herself in literally, blah, blah, blah. But then suddenly now we find out she's a doctor of psychology and has a good career and obviously, is very respected in the career. She has several clients,
hmm
that kind of thing. So that kind of threw me, I must admit, for a little bit. I was going, whoa, wait, what?
hmm
Oh, she's a professional.
yeah,
Because she kind of struck me as a little bohemian, in the other two episodes, and now suddenly she's not. She's a professional, which I liked,
right.
and I agree with you. I think it.
Yeah, you're actually making me see something in retrospect. She probably already knew she would be very successful at it because she can read into people, but she still needed the degree to actually,
Mm-hmm.
you know, practice it. So, I mean, it just I mean, she probably could have gone into any field and been successful. Once she started thinking, oh, I've got this gift, I can use this to make money too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm. And I think she does,
yep.
and that's what this episode explores is the fact that it's actually a gift that she's using for good,
Yeah, she is. It's
sort
not
of
for
thing.
money only. She's using it to support herself as well as help others.
So then we cut from this scene and we have our first, to me, his, metaphoric or his, I don't want to say gimmicky because I don't think they are. I actually think they're brilliant the way he does them, and it's almost like a Spielbergian kind of thing, but he uses a lot of cuts from, that are very unique. This one cuts from, Theo putting the toys in the box to suddenly Theo holding a box that her dad just gave her, young Theo,
Yeah.
back in the past,
It's
back when
like a
they had grown up.
transitional device he's using. between
Yes.
time.
Yes. To me, and you know what? Oh, I don't want to say it's a key. I don't want to say it. I don't know. I'll say it later.
Okay.
But and then we get the first inkling that Theo is different, that she has something unique about her because she holds the box and she says it's fancy. And because of that, her dad opens it up and it turns out that it has this, very, very probably valuable, but definitely old bottle of wine in it. And he even asks, how did you know that? And she goes, just seemed like it. Which bodes the question to me, and I wanted to throw it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think she had this gift before Hill House?
I'm going to say yes. And the reason I'm going to say yes is because Theodora had the gift in the book before they went to Hill House. So why not? If he's paying homage to the same character from the original novel, she was psychic before she came to the house.
Well, I kind of challenge you on it just because there are moments when this young actress, and again, we've talked already about how great the casting is for both the young characters and their older counterparts. But there's several times in this when she seems to be very not concerned, but inquisitive. She frowns a lot and she's questioning and she seems like she's going, where did this come from? Sort of thing. I get the impression that she didn't have the gift before Hill House.
Right.
And not that Hill House definitely gave it to her. I'm not saying that. But it seems like this is the birth of the touch for her. All of these scenes in the past.
Yeah, the house is the catalyst for her.
Correct.
Her power or whatever. It could be. I mean, I think it could be argued either way. But I do see where he did play into it a little bit, like she was discovering it, maybe, in this episode as a child. Like when she touches that pillow in that one scene and says, this is a sick bed.
Right.
Yeah.
And it seems to me at different times like she doesn't know particularly why she has this or what the reasoning is. Mm-hmm. And that to me kind of gives credence to the older character. Then she learns later on how to use it and how to... Well, we'll get to it with her.
Well, and not to digress too much, but if you go to novels like, Carrie immediately comes to mind, and the fact that Nell in the original Hill House novel, had telekinetic powers as well. Stephen King made Carrie's powers awaken with her first period, like her menstrual cycle, and I don't know much about women, obviously. But maybe Theo is getting to be that age where she's getting close to that, and that's why it's awakening too. It could be.
Well, could be.
Yeah.
Because there's also all the stuff, the books and research and everything about poltergeist saying, young children, especially a young female child, sometimes have, telekinetic poltergeist type activity. That's what led to Friedkin writing The Exorcist. Yeah. Was that, sort of thing. So,
right.
Yeah, that could be. Now, I don't think it's ever touched on in this series, of course, but that could be a possibility.
This is where you edit in a snippet of the song, "Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon." I don't know. It's just a thought.
Yeah. True, but I think that's a good possibility. Mm-hmm. We cut then. We're going, and his storytelling in this is going back and forth in time, which is good and well done, and I think as we've said, keeps it interesting and keeps us hooked on the mystery elements. But young Theo opens the refrigerator, and suddenly we cut to old Theo opening a refrigerator.
Well, she's not that old.
Back in the present. Well, our current Theo, let's say. I'll use that term. So she's not old at all. No. She is just fine the way she is. And we go through the next scene, and then it ends with Theo actually grabbing an apple off the counter to eat, and that suddenly cuts us back to young Theo eating an apple walking down the hallway. And this is where we show her reaction with her brother and sister, because Luke has found a horn-like weird device, something that's attached to the wall in the kitchen, And by touching it, Theo knows that it's what she calls a telephone inside the house. And that's when, like you said, she goes upstairs with Luke. And when she touches the bed in the bedroom upstairs beside the horn, she says, "This is a sick bed."
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "What do you mean?" And she says, "I don't know, but and backs away."
Mm-hmm.
So she obviously feels it. And like I said, I see her questioning that ability. She looks down at her hand like, where did that come from?
Right.
And why do I know that? A more clever cut, again, because we're jumping through the scene by scene, but a more clever cut is Nellie through the little horn says, "Hello." And we suddenly cut to current Theo saying hello to a patient. Another a boy, a young boy.
Right.
So she has showing that she's not just a one-note psychiatrist. She has several patients.
And obviously a child psychiatrist, because it seems like all her clientele are children.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, so that says to me a layer to that character. Kind of like she could have chosen any profession. She could have been a stockbroker, or could have been a go to Vegas every weekend or whatever. But instead, she's using it to help, and primarily she's using it to help children.
Right. Which is
again
noble.
Possibly because so much of this family was cursed by what happened to them as children.
Right.
At Hill House.
Yeah. There are no accidents here. This is done for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And again, deliberate writing, deliberate direction, and works so well.
Mm-hmm.
The next scene I have notes on is
Have we got to the Paula Abdul scene yet?
Theo is, and we are right there.
Yeah.
Yes, young man, you have picked it. So Theo is now suddenly in a room, obviously in Hill House. This is young Theo,
I just love
she's
it.
dancing to a Paula Abdul video.
Yeah, she's gonna learn that choreography to that video. That is hilarious to me, because that shows that she really is a kid. She wants to master that.
Yes, over and over again, she will watch it and do it, and she is interrupted by the door handle.
And that is a great shot. I love that shot.
Mm-hmm. I do too. And to me, it's an homage back to the first episode with the doorknobs.
Right.
But the fact that something is on the other side of this door, and she thinks it is. Who does she yell at? Steve, I think. Steve, you're not funny, or Shirley, you're not funny. One of that.
Yeah, she thinks.
But she doesn't open the door. She doesn't open the door, but she does get down and try to look under it and doesn't see anything, to which, we have several minutes there of we think she will and we're kind of scared. But the fact that it's something on the other side of the door, but then she just ignores it and, like you said, goes right back to mastering that choreography. She will make it work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for those of you watching it for the first time and following along with us, so let's say this is the first time you've seen this third episode and you have not seen the rest of the series, this scene, although it seems innocuous right now, actually plays into the ending of this series. So we'll just say that and leave it there, because it's a great sequence that you suddenly go duh at the end of the series. But we cut back to her doing her Paula Abdul. And she is wanting to dance and wanting to master it. And then we cut to our current Theo,
which is modern
dancing
dance
as well.
music. And she is in a bar.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Dancing at the club that obviously she frequents.
Mm-hmm.
And she does the brush off to her one-night stand from the other night.
Mm-hmm. I can't remember her name.
Very subtly. There's no... I can't either. Now you've thrown me. I'll have to look it up. But there's no real dialogue in this scene except water. She asks for a glass of water. But she does. It's all through eye contact. It's all through the way it's cut, edited, but very nice. The fact of, I'm still interested.
Her name is
you
Trish.
Want me to go away? Okay, fine. Trish. Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's an attraction between the two, but Theo has the wall up. She turns away and says, Don't even come near me. Don't come over here. That sort of thing, kind of non-verbally. We continue with these unique transitions. She drinks a glass of water, and it cuts to young Theo getting a glass of water. And now we're back in the kitchen, back in Hill House, and we have Mrs. Dudley, who is chastising Luke because Luke wants to know what the kid elevator is. And, you know, that Theo basically says it's a dumbwaiter and leave it alone. Don't worry about it. And he goes, I really want to know where it goes. And it's obviously designed for a kid, which I thought was a good line. But Mrs. Dudley chastises him, and Theo stands up to her. You know, young Theo says, don't touch him. Take your arm off of him. Whatever. Which I thought was pretty cool. She doesn't like Mrs. Dudley.
Well, it's also she's protecting kids just like she grows up to do.
Oh, yeah, good. I haven't seen that. That's a good one. But Mrs. Dudley grabs her arm, and when she does, she reads Mrs. Dudley. To me, that was kind of a clue or a revelation, too, because it wasn't just, it shows that Theo not only has this ability, this gift, whatever, by reaching out and touching something, but if someone touches her, even not on the hand, anywhere, she can sense them.
Right.
So that was kind of interesting. And she actually calls Mrs. Dudley out. I can't remember what she says, but she says something to the effect of, you know, that's because you're afraid or you're scared of the dark or something like that. And you see it obviously affect Mrs. Dudley, the housekeeper. She's like, oh, wow, this kid's possessed by a demon. No, but she, you know, you can see that.
I know this kid knows more than she's aware of.
Right.
I mean, Miss Dudley has knowledge of the house already. And apparently now she sees that so does Theo.
Yeah, she has, you know, the line you mentioned, that's why we won't be here for you when you're alone.
In the dark.
In the night or in the dark.
Yeah. Exactly. and alone in the night, in the dark. It's like, how many times can you keep going and just stretch it out?
Yes,
it tickles me.
Going away now. Yeah.
I'm shutting the door. It's closing.
And and then we're back with current Theo in modern day. She's reading reports. She ends up drawing Mr. Smiley. And I didn't know. I was going to ask you, do you think that was sight, vision, touch, whatever? Or do you think it was just a weird moment and he was like leading us down a false trail sort of thing? What do you think?
You're going to have to, was this set as a child or as an adult?
No, it's an adult. She's in bed and she's reading through reports. And she ends up like kind of getting a glassy vacant look in her eyes. And then she starts drawing, and she just draws the two dots, one bigger than the other, and the weird smile on the report.
Maybe she is seeing it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know, so I was kind of curious.
Yeah, I didn't really pay much attention to that. I want to go back just a bit, though. I do have a question. Why is she always drinking water? Big glasses of water. Have you noticed that?
No, I hadn't, but now that you mentioned it.
One of them is one of those transition shots you're talking about. She's drinking a tall glass of water as a girl, and then she's drinking a tall glass of water as an adult. And I'm like, does this psychic energy make her really thirsty? I just.
Oh, that's a good supposition.
I thought it was just interesting.
I don't know.
That and I'm going to be looking for that from now on. I want to see how much water she drinks. It's just kind of
well, you know, and
quirky.
She does drink a lot, whether it's water or other things.
Or alcohol.
But she does.
Yeah.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah, maybe she's just dehydrated. I don't know. Not as a child, though.
Yeah, it's for all the hangovers, you know. So, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to digress.
But interesting, yeah. I think that's a great question. That's a great observation, too. I hadn't thought of that, but it's something to actually look for in the next, 6 episodes or so. And we have another one of his bed position cuts. So she draws the little smiley. She puts the reports up. She turns over on her side in bed, and now we're at that side angle again. She turns out the light, and suddenly cuts to her asleep on that side, and the cover starts moving. and pulling off of her. You know, that to me, it was the first time I kind of went, that's kind of a cliche. It's creepy, bothered me, but I've seen it before, you know, in other things. The covers pull off, it wakes her up, she looks down, and at the end of the bed is Mr. Smiley, the first big jump scare of this episode.
I thought that happened after the dumbwaiter.
No, we're not at the scary dumbwaiter yet.
Oh, okay. Somehow I have that backwards. Sorry.
Yeah, because I think because her focus is now on Mr. Smiley. She's still obsessed with this Mr. Smiley thing, and it's bothering her that you know, the girl's story is still haunting her, kind of thing. But she actually sees, you know, Mr. Smiley at the foot of her bed and screams and wakes up, and it's actually a dream, or it's actually if it's haunting her, then, you know, she's waking up from it,
right?
Sort of thing. Then there's a knock on the door, which kind of scares us because we're going, okay, are we real? Is she still awake? Is it not? You know, at that whole mood that he sets, which is so cool. She goes to the door, and it's Shirley, and Shirley's telling her about Nell. And then we get this really sad scene of them, you know, on the bed, and and Theo, by the way, Theo's drinking. But now she's drinking straight out of a bottle, but she is drinking a clear liquid. And I thought that was a good scene between the two of them. They don't even make eye contact the entire scene. They're both just staring kind of straight ahead, sitting on the edge of the bed. But what they say and what they talk about, because she's, as Theo says, she's angry. Because, as she says it, Nellie knew what this does to a family. And she's, you know, mentioning something else that obviously affected all of them personally, but she's upset about it. Then we cut to a little bit of levity scene, which I kind of like, which is Nellie's wedding. They're looking to do the toasts. It's time to do the toasts at Nellie's wedding. So obviously the wedding has happened. We're at the reception, but she can't find her bridesmaid,
right?
Who is supposed to do the toast. So Nellie and Stephen go looking for the bridesmaid. And end up coming to a door. They're hearing, obviously, some unique things are happening on the other side of this door.
Yeah.
Yes. And they're waiting, and she knocks on the door, and the bridesmaid comes out, you know, and says, and she goes, "It's time for the toast." She goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry." You know, Stephen kind of chuckles and says, "You know, you might want to check your makeup in the mirror."
Right. She's all flush.
Right. And Nellie goes to leave, and Stephen doesn't. And Nellie goes, "What?" He goes, "I want to see who's on the other side of the door."
Right.
And they even start making bets about, I think it's Bob. I think it's John, because, you know, he's always doing this at weddings, da-da-da-da. And they're waiting for whoever to come out the door. And who comes out?
Theo.
But Theo.
Yeah.
And it is such a nice little levity moment, but it's also so good the way they all play it, because what do you say?
Yeah.
And
is she literally coming out? Like, is that the first time?
Literally.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because she is coming out
to
of
her
the door.
family, obviously.
Yeah.
For the first time. Yeah. And the way Nellie says it, because I even wrote it down. She goes, we didn't know that you were that you were into, and Theo responds, bridesmaids? It's just perfect. Yeah. It says everything without saying everything, and the way they all three look at each other and laugh, it's suddenly like, and we love you for it.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
Well, and Nell even hugs her and says, "I love you," I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's genuine. You can feel it. It's not a mask. It's not something they're doing to be polite. They genuinely say, and it's fine with us. That's great, honey. We love you. You love it.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And by the way, I have a note here, a trivia note. Nellie, in that scene, does such great work and facial expression and her inflect and yada yada and the hug and everything. Did you know, trivia-wise, the actress playing Nellie is Victoria Pedretti is her name, because I wrote it down.
She reminds me of Liv Tyler a bit.
Interesting. I could see that. Yeah. Could definitely see that. But the trivia is this is really her first acting role.
She's great.
Right out of drama school. This is her first role. She did a short film in like 2014 or whatever, but that was it.
Mm-hmm.
This is really her first role. And she is great in it. Very, very much so. Okay, so then
I got to
we
point
go
out,
to...
I think you have skipped the dumbwaiter scene. I swear I do.
I think... Well, where did I put it then in my notes? I don't think so.
I have the dumbwaiter scene right before the pulling of the covers. I think there was a transition somewhere where they jumped back and forth.
Yes. I am so sorry.
That's okay.
That is correct, because
we can go
Theo
back.
Turns out...
The magic of audio.
And we rewind.
We're going back.
Back. She does turn out the lights after seeing the writing, the smiley on the paper.
Mm-hmm.
She turns out the lights, and turning out the lights suddenly cuts to turning the lights on in the kitchen. And Luke is in the dumpster.
In the background, yes, exactly.
Correct. You are so right.
Yeah. I can't leave that scene out. That scene's great. That scene scared the shit out of me.
Yes, I think that's maybe why I repressed that scene. Because it is, from the very moment he's sitting in it, I don't feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, no. And then, so for our dear listeners, then Theo helps him, and he begs her, and she says, "No, I'll get in trouble."
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "Please, Theo." And with that, who's a great actor too, that little kid voice.
He's so cute.
So she closes the door, which is just a grate, really. It's not a full door.
Right.
And she hits the button, but instead of going up, Luke goes down.
Yeah.
And that next scene, all of it, the editing, the cutting, the way it's shot. One thing I can tell you that got me was the pacing. First of all, was just showing the flashlight and the beam and what Luke is seeing.
Yes.
Then his voice starting to break as he goes, I'd rather it come up now.
Yeah.
Because at first he's kind of cool. He goes, ooh, there's a stairwell, there's a ladder.
Uh-huh.
You can come and get me, and da-da-da. But then he starts getting scared. And then when he...
I have 8 words written down.
Okay, do it.
The hand, the face,
mm-hmm.
the flashlight,
mm-hmm.
the screams.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically the order it comes in. You see the hand.
Correct.
And then it cuts to him. You see the face. Then the flashlight starts flickering. And then it's upstairs and you just hear him screaming. And I'm like, whoa.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whoa.
I think it's so good, so creepy. And I will compliment him as a filmmaker in that the first time the hand comes out from behind the barrel, there is no stinger. There's no music. There's no particular, jump scare moment to it. It jump scares us, but it's not emphasized. It's only when the face comes out and the creature or whatever starts crawling toward him that we get a big sting of music and everything starts picking up and he starts screaming.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that scared me even more.
Yeah.
Because at first I thought, Luke, didn't you see that? That was an arm. Didn't you see that? Come on.
Well, and not only is he stuck down there, now it's dark because the damn flashlight went out.
Yes.
Yeah. Ooh.
And then we're just, like you said, we're just upstairs and we're just hearing this kid literally in terror screaming as mom and dad come in and they try to get him up and you're going, hurry, hurry, hurry. And when they finally do get him up and his clothing is ripped and everything, it's like the typical responses they do. Mom is more concerned about the kids, which is typical. And dad is going, well, you just must have caught it on the door. He's making excuses from the very beginning. And to him, I don't think to Hugh, the dad, I don't think they're excuses. I think he genuinely sees the practical side, not the spiritual side or the ghostly side. Then mom gets mad at Theo, just like she knew she would.
Yeah.
And to your point, yes. Then it cuts to Theo upstairs crying, upset. It's all her fault. She rolls over in bed on the side. We cut to that side. Then we cut to current Theo, adult Theo,
Yeah.
and the covers get pulled back.
And that's I wrote down,
And
stop pulling the covers. Yeah.
Well, yeah, obviously, Theo shouldn't go to bed because when she goes to bed, she either holds hands with ghosts or there's a ghost at the foot of the bed.
Yeah.
So just don't sleep anymore.
Yeah. So now we need to jump back ahead a little bit. After the bridesmaid. Yeah. Yeah.
And now Theo goes to apologize to Luke and say, I'm sorry. And you can tell she feels guilty about it. And he mentions the fact that Mom and Dad don't believe him about what was in the basement. And she touches him.
Yeah.
And then says, I believe. And I think that's the first time she gets this, to me, character-wise, that's the first time Theo gets this compulsion that I can help a kid. I can help my brother.
Yeah.
I know they're telling the truth, so I want to find out the truth.
Right.
And she goes and investigates. And now we find out, again, just like the box at the beginning, that it's not just people. Or the bed. She can touch inanimate objects, and she can, it's reinforcing. She can touch inanimate objects and get the story from them.
Mm-hmm.
Because she finds the trap door underneath the ancient washing machine.
She's a psychic crime solver.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's emphasized by, as we talked about the last two episodes, when she opens the trap door, if you're a dear listener and watching it, look at that shot and look at the stairwell that the ladder she's about to go down.
Yeah, there's a face there.
Because there's a face, there's a ghost.
There's a ghost
right
face.
Downstairs.
It's just very brief and very creepy.
Yes. And I got to admit, that whole scene, again, no dialogue and no real important information, but that's a scary scene. Her going downstairs, finding the lights, being alone in that room, looking at stuff, touching stuff, going to the big cobwebby covered door and opening.
And she touches all those spider webs. Who touches spider webs? That's just gross. Yeah. She doesn't even brush them off.
True.
She just grabs the knob and the handle, and it's got spider silk all over. It's just nasty. Anyway.
Yes. And he does that transition thing. She opens this door, and we think we're going to get Jump Scare 9000, but instead we cut to the mother of Kelsey opening the door, and Theo is standing there in current day. And she says, I've been in the neighborhood, and I just thought I would come by and look around. And they let her in. And it's, again, another great acting moment in this series. And in this episode in particular, there's a lot of acting without dialogue. So you get this, again, a scene with just Theo, and she doesn't say anything. She goes into this foster family's basement and just starts walking around touching stuff without her gloves.
And I love how they focus on her hand touching things.
Yes, the camera follows.
It's like it's like the hand is the character of the scene. Yeah.
She ends up on the couch. She ends up having a very bad vision, obviously, from or moment with what has happened to Kelsey, and looking up at the floorboards or the ceiling. She sees Mr. Smiley.
Yeah, it's knot holes in pine wood.
Correct.
Yeah.
And this is totally a personal key. No one else would get this but us. But it reminded me of the house that we shared together and the wood paneling, because I always saw faces and birds and things in the wood paneling that house had.
I know what you're talking about. That was old paneling.
Yeah, and it reminded me of that. You could see faces in the paneling, and you could see creepy things in the paneling at times. But that's what it reminded me of. And then she goes upstairs, and we get her intentionally, without wearing gloves, shaking Dad's hand.
Yeah.
And that gives her all she needs for the whole story.
Right. She takes the glove off, doesn't she? Or she takes it off somewhere in that scene. Or maybe she takes the second glove off.
Yeah, she takes her glove off to shake his hand.
Yeah.
And you suddenly realize, and she knows the whole story, and that's why it cuts to her outside calling, I guess, the police, Child Protective Services, whomever.
My guess is it may be a contact that she's spoken with before, because she says, you're just going to have to trust me on this one.
And yeah, actually, she says the line, have I ever been wrong before?
Right, exactly. So this is somebody she knows.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
and obviously she has had situations where she has had to do something similar to this before. Had either foster parents arrested or had something go wrong. But it's a creepy, awful, disgusting thing we don't want to think about, but definitely it's been happening. And as she predicts, Dad admits to it as soon as he's approached by the police. So, and she sits there and watches him get pushed in the police car and driven away.
And I love how he
cries.
does that shot. I mean, I know it's just, it's movie making, you know, it's been done a million times, but I love how that car backs out just enough that he's facing her right there through the window. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've seen it a million times
and
before.
And then they can make eye
works.
contact.
Yeah.
Yes, I totally agree. And we cut from that to one of my actually favorite. No, we cut from that to this is not my favorite scene, but we cut from that to a good scene because it's Theo talking to her mom and her mom telling her all about the bootlegging and the fact that the seller that she found is not on any of the blueprints. And how did you find it? And she says, well, I just knew it was there. I just did. And Mom, you can tell, is kind of sort of suspecting something we don't know, blah, blah, blah. And Mom reaches out to touch her, and we see a bad vision. So Theo has a very bad vision of her mom, all bloody and half her head caved in and blood on her hands and all of that, and she backs up and screams.
Yeah.
Then we have, following that, actually, and that was a little bit out of order. So we had that scene. Then we cut to the guy being arrested. Then we cut to Theo and her mom, and one of my favorite scenes in it, which is the whole scene between Olivia and Theo, where Olivia presents her with her first pair of gloves and tells her the whole story about how all of the women on this side of the family are what she calls sensitive.
Well, and that's another reason why I think that she had it before she came to Hill House, too. Because Olivia notes.
But I kind of interpreted that differently because the way Olivia says it, she says, your mother, you know, your grandmother, my mother was sensitive, you know, too. And blah, blah, blah. She doesn't really say how, but she says she was sensitive, too. And she goes, and she doesn't really admit anything about herself, but I got the impression that she was kind of waiting for it to happen. Almost like she was waiting for it to develop, and now she's seen the first signs when she suddenly pulled back screaming, and that's why she's giving her the gloves.
You make her sound like Karen Black in Burnt Offerings. It's like, oh, this house is going to make you do what it wants to. No.
Yeah, but it was just her. I just loved it, and I loved the way Theo was smiled, and then the way her mom held her hand up and she touched her with the gloved hand and smiled. You know, so there was this. But it also, in a way, did some bad stuff because it says, you know, I'm giving you a wall. I'm giving you. It has so many layers to it to me because it's Olivia saying I'm always going to protect my children, but it's also giving Theo her first cop out, her first insulator. You know, these gloves she'll wear the rest of her life to keep her from having to feel things. We're nearing the end of the show because then we go to Theo being the first to say, I'm taking the money.
Yeah, she's got like 3 lines in here that are like my favorite lines of the whole episode.
Okay.
And the first one is when she walks away and she says, I'm getting my fucking PhD. That made me really laugh. And that also made me realize, oh, okay, she's going to put it to good use so that she can help people and make money with it. So.
And I also like the exchange right before that when she kind of chastises Steve in front of his wife even and says, that was some good writing there. Considering you were asleep for 99% of it.
Yeah, and you got this part
You know.
wrong. I love when she says, "You got this part wrong." That was me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was not Luke. That was me.
And I like that. I like the fact that she calls him out on it and says, "Yeah, you're gonna make money off of it, but it's not right? It's not real because you made it up." That embellishment thing. Which, yeah, that was a great scene. And then again, we follow that with her going out the door, and then it cuts to her going out her own little guest house and going downstairs to see Nellie, the body of her sister.
Yeah, I was kind of like, would she be able to do that? I mean, that seemed a little too easy. It seems like general public would be kept out. And I know she's the sister. Does she have keys, or is it unlocked? I know it's poetic license, but I had like 100 questions right when she went down there. Why is she doing this? How can she do this? But
Right.
anyway.
Yeah. But again, it's a scene with no dialogue whatsoever. It's all in the acting and the directing and how it's presented. But basically and again, to your point, they cut to this really neat shot of showing her very slowly taking her gloves off, and then her hand reaching down and touching Nellie's forehead.
It's the whole title of the episode.
And when the touch.
Yeah.
And when she does, she gets this horrible montage vision of stuff, and we don't really know what it is. And what's happening or what happens, but it's this, because we don't know the basis for any of these images, but they're horrific and they're awful, so much so that it makes her back up, fall down, and just start sobbing and screaming, which is great. A good terror, good motion for us. It worked really well.
She says Jesus wept before that, doesn't she?
Yes, she does.
Somewhere
That's
in there.
actually before the touch. Before the touch, she says that. And I think that's just her first seeing her sister dead like that. And we go from the screaming to her back in her room. The girlfriend is now there. What was her name again? Tina?
Trish.
Trixie?
Trish.
Trish.
Yeah. Tina.
Trixie.
Tina. Watch this.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to be Freddy Krueger for a moment.
She suddenly tells her about her day and tells her about the kid and tells her about everything, that it was, she had to have the guy arrested and it was all.
No, wait. We missed something. Wait. We missed something. There's a scene with her on the porch with her brother-in-law, and she says, "Oh yeah, about that account." She's like, "I don't know, but you need to make something up, something that'll piss her off less." she lists like two horrible things, and then she says, "Yeah, something that'll piss her off less." I was like, that is the best line.
Yeah.
It's like you can have an affair or you can do something else horrible. Just don't tell her you took the money from Steven, because that's going to piss her off more.
Yeah. That was a great scene. She's drinking bourbon, I think, in that one. But he comes down she says, "I'm sorry I woke you." And then she says, she found the checkbook. And he goes, "Oh God." And she goes, "Yeah." And then she looks over and Trish is pulling up. So Trish is driving up to go into her room. He says, better tell her something else, like a mistress or whatever, something that'll piss her off less.
So that was like my second favorite line.
That is a good line. I sorry I missed that one. Yeah, that's true. And she goes inside. Trish says, "Thanks for calling." So obviously she has reached out to Trish.
Yeah.
Which is a nice little moment. And then she goes, "Well, let me tell you about my day."
Yeah, this is my third favorite thing. It's like when she's the woman's a little naive to Theo's stress. So Theo just kind of says, "Okay, well, here's what happened to me today." Bam. She just lists all these horrible things. Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't write it all down. It was too much. But that's my other third favorite thing that she does in the episode.
And I've got something totally wrong according to my notes here, and I need to correct it. When she touches Nellie's forehead, we don't see what she sees.
Now, that's what I was wondering. Because I wrote down, what do you think Theo saw? Because she doesn't see anything. You just see her reaction.
She sees something. We just don't know what she sees.
Right.
Because it's obviously so horrific that she
collapses
and starts screaming.
And I was going to ask you, what do you think she saw? I think she saw the bent net lady and realized who the bent net lady might be.
I don't think that far. I think she did see Nellie's death.
Right.
I think she saw Nellie killing herself, and I think or Nellie's suicide.
Right.
And I think she saw Nellie's suicide after the dance and all of that stuff. And I think she got all of that last, day of Nellie. I think she got.
Yeah.
The despair, the lack of hope, the going back to Hill House again, calling her dad, lying, everything. I think she got all of that, and that's why she's screaming and crying at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so much.
Yeah, I was wondering why you said there was a montage, because I was like, I don't remember seeing anything there. I just remember her
it's
collapsing.
Because then going to the next to last scene is we're back at Hill House on the last night. The one he keeps hinting at in every episode. Mm-hmm. What happened that last night?
Right.
And this we get a little bit more information just because we get the montage, because it's Theo's point of view. As we've said, each one of these beginning episodes is from a different kid's and adults' point of view, a different member of the families. Mm-hmm. And this is Theo's. And Theo is coming down the stairs, and this is the night they left. Theo's coming down the stairs. Dad rushes to him with Nellie and Luke and says, please take your kid, your brother and sister to the car. I've got to go get Steven. And she says, what's happening? Blah, blah, blah. We hear something. He ends up grabbing her by the shoulder, and when he does,
that's when she sees
we see this montage of everything. We see teacups, we see mom, we see and she backs up screaming, "Don't touch me, don't touch me, don't touch me." And that cuts to Theo and the girl in current day in her bed, and she says, "Touch me."
That's a great ending.
And I went,
yeah.
A great ending. Yes. Overall, though, and I'll be, my candid reaction at the end, after watching it again for the second time, overall, I think this is probably the weakest episode of the series. Not that, and by weak, I mean just comparatively to the other episodes. I think it's the least scary. I think it's the least moving forward the plot, so to speak. We find out a lot about Theo. And we find out a lot of subtext and a lot of textures, and I do think it's got some scary elements. But I think overall, compared to especially the first two, this is the not as scary to me. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
I'm looking through the titles of the episodes right now because I can't really remember if there was one that struck me less. I love this episode. I mean, obviously we love the episode. Because it is a character it's character development. It's a big character piece, as all of them are. And to me, those are what make the whole. So it may not be as scary, but Theo's one of my favorite characters. So I just really, really like this episode. And I guess once we go through a few more, I'll let you know. It may be the weakest of all. I don't know. Right now, I can't remember.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say compared to the first two, if we're watching this for the first time. Mm-hmm. So compared to the first two episodes, this one's a little bit lower key, not as scary. We don't find out any more at all about Hill House other than it had a bootlegging cellar.
Yeah, but I mean that scene with Luke is to me one of the scariest things that's happened so far, and it's in this episode.
Okay,
so.
I can give you that it is a terrifying sequence, I guess, so to speak. But yeah, that was just and again, I do like Theo a lot. I think she is one of my favorite characters. I like the layers and textures to her, plus the fact that I think the actress is very, very talented, not to mention gorgeous. So there's that. So I do like, that was just my take on it. After I watched it, I took that note and I said, it's probably, in my opinion, the weakest episode of the series. And saying a weak episode in this series is still better than 98% of things that are out there. So.
Right. I mean, even a show like Castle Rock had a couple of clunkers in there that weren't that great. Yeah. This one doesn't really have clunkers.
No, I don't think any episode is fodder or what did we used to call it with Babylon 5? We used to say it was a something episode.
A filler?
It was just a filler. Yeah, it was a filler episode.
Yeah, I don't see filler episodes in here.
So let's talk about keys.
Keys.
Why don't you start with some keys that you see?
Okay. Well, one thing you neglected to mention was that when Luke is rescued by Dad and Mom, and Theo gets in trouble for lowering him in the dumbwaiter down to the scary crawling thing, his sweater is torn. Theo finds a piece of it later. It's either a sweater or a shirt. She finds a piece of it later.
His pajamas.
Yeah. Which is a page right out of Kubrick's The Shining when Danny has been to room 217. And he comes back all catatonic, and his sweater is torn as well.
You are so correct.
Yeah, that one jumped right out at me. I was like, oh, it's little Danny Torrance. He just went into room 217. It's just a few floors down.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
That's a great one, yes.
So that's, and it's a ghost one. Another ghost movie. So.
Yes, another ghost one for you. One that came to me was, and it's during the beginning, and Theo's talking about building up everything brick by brick and building your walls and everything else, and I could only, my only key from that was Floyd, of course, because I love Pink Floyd and I love The Wall. And so that's what it reminded me of.
Wait, now, what are you saying again? Reminded you of The Wall?
When Theo is talking about building walls to insulate yourself, and you build it brick by brick.
Oh, yeah.
And you build another wall on top of that. And it just reminded me of, The Wall.
Right. And it could be the film or the music. Yeah, I see that. I have another Stephen King one.
Oh, good. And I have one after that. Go ahead.
I may have yours. When shortly after Theo comes upstairs from the basement and seeing Mr. Smiley Face, she takes off her glove and shakes that guy's hand, and it is right out of the Dead Zone when Johnny Smith shakes the hand of the president and sees the end of the world. That's a lot of Theo's character reminds me of Johnny Smith from the Dead Zone, the book or the movie.
That's good. That's great.
I mean, he solves crimes too. He solved the Frank Dodd murders because of his ability to see things. That's going way back. If you're going back to the book or the movie, or even the series that's on now, they mention it. There's a lot of similarities. So those are really the two big keys I have, and they're both Stephen King keys, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I had two Stephen King keys along the same line. I had the transitions that you talked about, these cuts that are very unique and everything else, remind me of, especially the way King did It, and how every chapter almost ended in a sentence that made you want to read the next freaking chapter.
Right.
It was some kind of hook or some kind of delivery literary device that really made you want to jump to the next chapter. And usually in It, those jumps were to a different time frame.
Right.
Because he has the young kids and the older kids. So I think those transitions were a key for me because it reminded me of that kind of storytelling.
Yeah.
Because they were linked. The two things were linked. And I think he's intentionally saying what happened in the past links to what happens in the future, and vice versa, kind of thing. And the other one was just Shining in general. The feel that I got from it, especially Luke in the dumbwaiter scene with the flashlight and seeing that, reminded me so much of going into room the room in The
Yeah,
Shining.
it's a different number in the book and in the movie. In the movie, I think it's 217. I can't remember what it is in the book, or
hmm
vice versa.
And,
But
and
yeah,
and just that overall feeling of being alone, the flashlight being your only light source, that a POV shooting, it was just reminded me of The Shining and the feel
hmm
in that. And I have one you might like. I don't know if you got it, and maybe not just because it's me, but when the bed sheet's being pulled back and she kind of and she wakes her up and she looks at the end of the bed and we see Mr. Smiley, and this is like a monster mask kind of Mr.
yeah,
Smiley.
it's
It's not
weird
a wood
looking.
grain, and it's a weird look. But the way it looked, the first thing I thought of was Nightbreed by Clive Barker. And the killer in that has the button
Oh
mask with the
yeah,
weird
I
mouth
forgot
and all
about
of
that.
that.
Yeah, I see that big
He
time.
he looked like that exactly. And I went, oh my God, that's a killer from Nightbreed.
Yeah, and it was David Cronenberg who directed The Dead Zone. That's great.
Yes, yes.
Let's weave it back in. Oh, that's
And
funny.
that leads to my last key, which is, and you probably got this one too, is Jesus Wept. Is anytime I hear that, I think Clive Barker. I think
Hellraiser.
of Hellraiser.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I should have picked
yeah.
up on that. I forgot all about that.
Ha!
You
Gotcha.
did.
No,
And
just
I
kidding.
want to, just to bring it full circle, this is just kind of a pervading key that's within the material itself, is the
Mm-hmm.
fact that Stephen King was obviously influenced by The Haunting of Hill House. He's written about it. He's written about the first movie, and then we're seeing, things in his books that came about probably from that book and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Flanagan is hugely influenced by Stephen King, has already directed two Stephen Kings, and is getting ready to do a third, right? Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I can only think of Gerald's Game right now, but I know he's doing Doctor Sleep, and it seems like he's done something else. But anyway,
I think.
so I mean, you can see the influences of the movies, the Stephen King movies we were talking about in this. So
Mm-hmm.
you've got Shirley Jack, you've got a big stew stirring of Shirley Jackson, Mike Flanagan, and Stephen King just all together. And I saw a lot of it,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that's why you were seeing it in this episode, and that's why I was seeing it in this episode. It's intentional, or well, it may be subliminal, but it's there.
I agree. I think this is well thought out, well structured, well written. It's definitely one of the best genre pieces to come out in a long time. And I think he has such a great grasp of how to do horror.
hmm
And not how to do the Eli Roth, oh, I can't even look at the screen anymore because it's so gross or disgusting, not do the Saw crap, but to me, as we've talked about in other podcasts, what is true horror, which is this, your mind going into overdrive and panic
Right.
of of things. The Spielberg thing of, what you don't show is scarier than what you do. The,
Or
the
Hitchcock.
illusions,
Yeah.
and he has it all in there. He has the Stephen King bent of making a contemporary thing scary
hmm
that normally we wouldn't ever think of as scary, but it is
Right.
now. And taking us to places that we don't think about or don't witness, but we know are out there all the time, like a mortician's parlor, or not parlor, but the prep room at a mortuary.
hmm
But also peppering it with this scary jump scares, characters that are evil and are scary, like the Kelsey's dad, that kind of
Random
thing, that
ghosts
perpetuate this
standing in
world.
the background.
Yeah, random, yes, that you might pick up on or you might not,
And
that sort of
that's
thing.
very Shining too.
So,
Now that I think about it, because every once in a while they would just see those girls standing in the hallway, or they would see the butler holding a tray,
yeah,
or the bartender. I mean, there were random ghosts in The Shining too.
every time Shirley has that recurring guilt vision, which we have to kind of talk about once it comes up, but the vision of the guy sitting there giving her a toast with his glass, I keep thinking of The Shining, where she looks down the hallway and sees the two guys in the bedroom, and the pig mask looks at her. That's the only
Yeah,
thing
one of
I
them's like
see
going
every
down
time
on
I
the
see
other
that.
one. One of them's like in a dog
Yeah,
costume or something. And
Yeah, like a pig or a dog or
and
something.
you've got the butler with the tray. Great party, isn't it? And he's got like a split
Mm-hmm.
head or whatever, blood going down.
Yeah. Well, then going back to that, there's some of that feeling even in Eyes Wide Shut. When he actually goes to the mansion and we get these weird masks and this weird cult fetish thing going on, and just the way people slowly turn to each other and look at each other and look at him, and they're, do you know the secret kind of feel to it. That's kind of peppered throughout the series too.
Hmm. And what you were saying about, it being the real deal as opposed to like some of the fetish crap that Roth has done as far as torture porn or Saw, those movies, it's the whole, I call it the sex versus masturbation thing, where, there's
Mm-hmm.
the real sex, there's the real deal, and it is, deep and amazing. And then you've got masturbatory stuff that is a cheap thrill that sometimes works, but it's not always great. So that's how I compare these things. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying Eli Roth is horrible. I'm saying, some of his stuff I like, or some of the things he does I respect because I know he's influenced by some of these people that we like as well. But the guy doing Hill House, Flanagan, he is borderline genius. He's definitely masterful at what he does. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there is a lot of thought that went into this show. A lot.
Well, and I mean, I will say, yeah, no, I don't like Eli Roth or anything, or him personally, or whatever. Yeah, I will say it because I'm not the horror aficionado you are, sort of thing.
Well, and I can't
But
even.
yeah, I
I've
can
only
see
seen
that.
his movies once, so I may not. I do seem to remember liking Cabin Fever a little bit, though. Anyway,
Well,
I'm not a big Hostel fan.
yeah, no. Or what was the,
Green and
we're going to go to the Amazon and eat
I
people,
haven't seen
whatever,
it, but
Green
it's
Day
called
or
Green Inferno, and it looks like all those
Green
movies that
Inferno.
I used to rent in the '80s. Cannibal Holocaust or
Oh,
whatever.
yeah. All the exploitation films.
Yeah,
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 he's
yeah.
definitely. I mean, he and Rodriguez and Tarantino should get together and just do another Grindhouse because Roth would be good for
And
that.
see, when they do
So
that, I appreciate it because I know what they're doing. You know.
correct.
Yeah,
That's intentional though.
yeah.
Oh, that was okay. Before we end, I do have to tell you one thing. So, I'm on this trip. I'm at the hotel. I'm just kind of searching through the television, saying what's on, and they had like a HBO or a Cinemax or something, and it started, and I was going, this looks wild. What is this? I'll have to watch it. I was like 10 minutes into it before I realized it was Rejects.
Devil's Rejects.
It was Rob Zombie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Devil's Rejects. So I watched about another 20 minutes and then went, no, I don't want to watch this.
No, Joe, our friend Joe Powell loved House of a Thousand Corpses, and I just don't get it. I mean, I know he's paying homage to some of those old '70s movies, but it's just not that good to me.
Yeah, I don't get
No.
it. It's more to me like torture porn twist, and it's not my bag of horror,
Yeah, I think
as they
Zombie
say.
should stick to music. I like his pairings with Alice Cooper in particular, but yeah,
Yeah. Well, yeah, we've already discussed how he screwed up Halloween, so we don't like that.
right,
So, yeah.
right. So, I do want to say one other thing before we break. Since you are a big fan of Flanagan's wife, um, I forgot her name.
Kate Siegel? Kate
Kate
Siegel?
Siegel, yes. I
Mm-hmm.
highly recommend watching the movie Hush. It is on Netflix, and she is amazing in it. And I don't want to tell you why because it's kind of a twist. So just watch that movie, and remember Flanagan did it too.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the first time I ever saw him.
You recommended that one to me. It's definitely on my list.
Hmm.
Um, one that I'll throw back to you that I don't know if you've even seen, but you should, is Quiet Place. Have you seen that yet?
Not yet, but I want to.
Speaking of Hush. I would recommend it just because I wouldn't be surprised if at least the actress in it, I can't remember her name
Emily
right now, but
Blunt.
she might be nominated. Yeah, she might be nominated for an Oscar for it.
Oh wow. Okay.
Should be crazy for a horror movie. But it has huge issues, I think. But as an exercise in a horror movie, I think you'll like it.
Okay.
So I'll do Hush, you do Quiet Place, and we'll put those on the list.
Okay. Yeah, down the road. All right.
Yeah. All right, man.
All right. I guess
Have a great week. We'll see you next week when we cover episode 4 of Haunting of Hill.
Yeah, sounds great. Good to talk to you.
Thank you so much for listening to Johnny Has the Keys. You can learn more about us at our website, johnnyhasthekeys.com, and our Facebook page. Avoid missing shows by subscribing on iTunes and Google Play, and please like, rate, and review us. We're doing this for genre geeks like ourselves, and we can't continue without your support. See you next show, and don't lose your keys.